Good afternoon, everyone. This is Reverend Sherry L. Jackson, based in Alexandria, Louisiana. Tonight, we are beginning our study of the fourth book of the Old Testament, the fourth book of the Torah, the fourth book of the Pentateuch. This is actually our 30th lesson or so. We've been doing this for quite a while, and we have Numbers and the book of Deuteronomy. Our intent was to give the first 5 books of the Bible, which are called the law books, but it it is the beginning of, if we can understand these books, we will have a clear picture of the rest of the Bible, because in the first 5 books of the Bible, God lays down the law. It's the beginning. It's everything else that comes after these books are actually built on the first 5. And before we end, after we get to Deuteronomy and end that, I'm going to show you how everything else builds upon these books. The first 5 books, the books of the law, and then when we get to the book of Joshua, which is the 6th book, we have the people actually getting ready to go into the promised land. So let's see where we are, what we've come through through Genesis. We started out, we know that Genesis is the book of beginnings. This is where we were introduced to the major characters of some of the major characters. This is where God strikes up his covenant with Abraham, tells Abraham that he's going to be the father of many nations. We have Isaac, we have Jacob. We know that whole story of how Abraham and his wife were promised a son. Abraham, being old, did not have it in him, nor his wife, but God said they were going to bring a child through Abraham and Sarah. Of course, they got a little antsy, and Sarah had Abraham to get with her servant Hagar, which produced the son Ishmael. By right, according to the culture at that time, Ishmael really should have been the heir, but God was doing something different, and it was not going to come through Ishmael. It was going to come through Isaac. So we have Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and it is Jacob's 12 children who have produced this offspring that we are actually talking about. It is his children, his offspring, that was in bondage in Egypt. And then as we get to Exodus, we talked about how those children of Jacob were brought out of slavery in Egypt, and God said that these people were going to be his prized possession, that they were going to be his people, he was going to be their God. Then we got through the book of Leviticus, which we just came through. We just came through Leviticus, and we came through Leviticus, and Leviticus was the manual of how the children of Israel, the Israelites, were to approach a holy God. We do know that even at this time, even though Jesus has not come as Christians understand it, God did provide a way for them to come to him, and that was through the sacrifices. And so Leviticus was about the sacrificial system, how an unholy people were to approach a holy God. And so tonight we begin with Leviticus. Now, we begin with Numbers. Leviticus is pretty much a manual of worship. And so we did not get much narrative. There wasn't much dialogue going on other than God giving Moses all of these instructions. So Numbers picks up the narrative that Exodus had, and God gives further instructions, but he gives instructions not so much about how to worship him, but how to proceed in their journey toward the promised land. So that's where we are tonight. We are beginning that tonight. So let's look at the difference between Leviticus and Exodus, Leviticus and Numbers. I'm sorry, Leviticus and Numbers. In Leviticus, we talked about the believers' worship, how the Israelites were to worship, how the Israelites were to worship. And then in Numbers, it's going to be how the believers are to work. So in Leviticus, we talk about worship. In Numbers, it's going to be how to work, how to proceed on the journey. Leviticus dealt with purity, and Numbers is going to deal with the pilgrimage. They're going to be moving. The journey picks up again. They are still at Mount Sinai, the base of Mount Sinai, where they are getting all these instructions, but they are actually going to start moving again. Leviticus deals with our spiritual position, and Numbers deals with our spiritual progress. So Leviticus again deals with our spiritual position, and Numbers will take up and deal with our spiritual progress. Leviticus dealt with the ceremony in the sanctuary, and Numbers is going to deal with the history in the wilderness. It is in Numbers that they spent these 38, 40 years wandering in the wilderness. And we're going to find out why they ended up wandering, what happened, what caused them to get stuck. There are some things, even though we have specific instructions, we know where we're going, but then there are some things that cause us to be stuck, and it takes us longer to get where God wants us to be because we just get stuck. We don't move. We don't move and make the progress that we need to be because of fear, because of what other people may say, and all kinds of hindrances. However, God is going to show us through Numbers that the actual ones who started the journey will not be the ones who actually make it over. So Numbers is a book that deals with, they are going to start moving, but they're not going to get far. They are going to get stuck in the process, and they're going to end up being in the wilderness. Again, Moses is credited as being the author of Numbers, as he is given credit for Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. The purpose is to call the second generation of the Exodus to serve God as his holy army in the conquest of the promised land by avoiding the failures of the past and by remaining faithful to God's directives. Now you say the second generation. Yes, the second generation, because the first generation is going to die out in the wilderness because they did not, they got scared. And so they were not able to cross over. The second generation did. The question is, what causes us to not be able to possess the land that God has for us, to possess those promises that God has for us, even when we can almost see it? And mind you, that when they got stuck in the wanderings in the desert, they were not far from the promised land. They were not far at all. So some of the key things that we can find out, truths that we can find in this book, is God fully prepared his people to serve him and to succeed in the conquest of the promised land. In other words, they had everything that they needed to take the land. The members of the first generation failed to succeed because they were ungrateful for the grace God has shown them, and they feared the power of the Canaanites. Now, it is in Numbers where we get the story about the grass, thinking that the grasshoppers, they saw these, that they was just big, and they got to overtake us and all this kind of stuff. Well, anyway, they got scared and went back. This is story, remember, 12, the spies went out and only 2 came back, Joshua and Caleb, that said that, we can overtake them. A lot of times you hear sermons about, don't listen, the majority is not always right, and things of that nature. But God raised up another generation for the conquest, but they also had to remain faithful to the Lord in order to succeed. So even though the original travelers, the original generation did not make it over, it did not mean that just because they failed, that God's ultimate plan was going to fail. God always will use who he needs to reach the ultimate goal. Just because the first generation does not make it over does not mean that God will not do what he needs to do. Now, just for a pause real quick, we do seem to have some new people online tonight, and I welcome you in our study tonight. And this is an open forum. If you have some questions, you can ask openly, or you can chat, send a question by chat, and I will try to pick it up, but I certainly do encourage dialogue. So what is the theme of, what are the major themes in this book of Numbers? Numbers demonstrates that God's unconditional faithfulness to the nation of Israel. Even though they messed up, God still was faithful to them. He still loved them, and he still provided a sense of grace. He still provided grace for them. Over and over again, regardless of their rebellion and unbelief, he always supplied their needs. Now, these are things that we could take for our own situation in our own lives, regardless of our rebellion and the unbelief and the fear and our getting stuck and don't want to move forward and complaining, because we're going to see some more of this, that complaining. God still supplied their needs. He provided them with water, manna, quail. He continued to love them, forgive them, even when they complain, grumble, and rebel. And again, as we've talked about from Genesis, we make these Bible characters out of these superheroes, but they were people. They were people with real issues, real human frailties. They were just people, just like us. But yet God, regardless of, and in spite of them, and despite them and their situations, God still completed his ultimate plan through them. Now remember, these are the people, these are the family members of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And we know that, and we remember through our earlier studies what kind of problems they had. Within this family, you have liars, adulterers, you have all kinds of people, but God still used them. God still used them. While the first generation rejects the blessings of the covenant, God is faithful to the covenant. The covenant was that Abraham's covenant, Abraham, I'm going to make you the father of many nations. And also to the covenant to the children of Israel was that in Exodus 19:5-6, I will be your God, you will be my people. I am going to make you a kingdom of priests. Not that you are, But because I have chosen you, I'm going to make you a kingdom of priests. You're going to be my people. Again, we talked about it. There was nothing special about the Jews. It was just the group of people that God chose. He could have chosen anyone, but he chose to come through through Abraham's line. And so it's all about, we can't pick and choose or say who God will or will not work through, because God chooses as he pleases. So the first generation rejects the blessings of the covenant. God is faithful to the covenant, to the covenant, to the covenant. In spite of their complaints and rebellion, he still blesses them and fulfills his promise. Now, that story of Balaam, we're going to deal with that. That's an interesting story, and we'll deal with that a little later as we go through this book of Numbers. So the book of Numbers covers about 38 years, spanning from the second year after the Exodus. So it's only been 2 years since they've been out of Egypt. So they still got a lot of that in them. They still got a lot of it. It hasn't been a long time since they left Egypt. And it's going to go all the way to the 40th year after the Exodus. So it's going to be about it'll be 40 years when they actually get ready to enter the promised land. So right now it's 2 years. They're just 2 years out from leaving Egypt. And when we get to the end of Exodus, Numbers, when they get ready to cross over, get ready, it's going to be 40 years. Now just think, it could have been 2.5 years had they done what they needed to be. Okay, and most of the time is spent wandering. Most of the time is spent wandering. So how is the book of Numbers outlined? How is the book of Numbers outlined? Now, it is called Numbers because of God requiring a census. God requiring a census to know how many people we have, because God wants to know who's available of fighting men. Strong men is who he's really looking for. And that's in the let's just go to Numbers 1 through 4. Then the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the 10th meeting on the first of the second month in the second year after they had come out of the land of Egypt, saying, take a census of all the congregation of the sons of Israel, yours may say men, by their families, by their father's household, according to the number of names, every man, head by head, from 20 years old and upward. Whoever is able to go to war in Israel, you and Aaron shall number them by their names. With you, moreover, there shall be a man of each tribe, each one head of his father's household. So there are specific instructions, and as you can tell by the slide here, is generation 1 is going to be counted, and that's all about chapters 1 through 14 is all about generation 1. Generation 2 is going to take place chapter 15 through 36. Chapter 15 through 36. And so there's specific instructions. God say, take a census, count up all the families, and I want you to make sure that you get every male from 20 years up and above, and those who are able or who have the strength to go out to war in Israel. and Aaron shall number them by their armies. Now, Aaron's family, the priests, the Levites, were not going to be counted because remember, they were not made for war. Their function was to take care of the temple, not the temple at this time, but to take care of the tabernacle, the tent. And so all the men 20 and above, they wanted to know that, and that they were able to go to war. Because remember, the land that they were going to take was not an empty place. The land that they were going to take had people there. And so they were going to have to possess this land. They were going to have to fight for it. Now, I would just put a pin like right there, that even though God has told us or promised some things to us or told us we can have some, we still have to go and possess it. It's not like it just comes on a silver platter. Yes, some things just happen that way, but a lot of times we have to actually go and make it happen. You know, okay, God said, I'm going to get this job. Well, you got to actually get up and do what it takes. You got to go and possess it. Okay. And so that's why it was important that those who were 20 years old and above, those who were able to go out and fight, God wanted to know, we need to know who these people are because they need to be ready. So in chapters 1 through 14, again, it's about the generation 1. In chapters 1 through 4 is about the numbering. Chapters 5 through 6 is about instruction. And chapters 10 through 14 is about the journey for the first generation. And as you can see, it repeats with the second generation because the people in the second generation would not have been around when the instructions were given to the first generation. So it's like the way that the book is divided is that it parallels each other, but the first generation is not around, and so God has to start over basically from scratch. So again, this is another way to look at this, is that Israel is at Mount Sinai. The original generation is given law. And then in 10 through 21, Israel is in the wilderness. And now it's a transitional generation. In other words, they are going to be punished because of their ungratefulness, because of their fear, because of their disobedience. And so this generation is going to transition out, and then there's going to be a new generation that is going to come in, and then God is going to give them the laws all over again. Again, if I am going too fast, let me know. Get in at any time, and you may ask a question or send it through chat. I'm trying to monitor that too. So the time period, as you can see, remember I told you earlier that the majority of this book is going to take place in the wilderness. So they are still at Mount Sinai. Numbers 1 through 10 basically takes place in 20 days. 20 days. And then they will get to the wilderness in chapters 10 through 21, and that's going to take place 38 years, 3 months, and 10 days. And then as they start to move out, by the time we get to the end, it's going to be about 6 months to take place when Israel is now on the plains of Moab. So again, we can see how much time is spent in the wilderness doing nothing. Just wandering, just going round and round and round, round and round and round. Really wasted time. How much time have we wasted just wandering, just aimlessly in the wilderness? But it also there are some lessons to be learned in the wilderness. because sometimes, because we don't get the instructions right the first time, we will be placed in a wilderness, so to speak, so that we can get it the second time. It's almost like a vault lesson is better um, is better than anything. It does cost. Okay. So right now, what I want you to see here is remember the tent of the meeting. Remember the tent of the meeting. And I showed you this before, where all around is the are the tribes, and they are strategically placed. They are strategically placed, and we're going to go through that right now. And there is a reasoning for how they are placed around the tabernacle. Remember, again, all of the tribes are around, and God is in the middle. God is in the middle. So let's look at this here. Numbers 2 and 2 says, well, starting with Numbers 2, now the Lord spoke to Moses and to Aaron, saying, the sons of Israel shall camp each by his own standard with the banners of their father's household. They shall camp around the tent of meeting at a distance. Now, if you've ever seen, each tribe has a flag or a banner or a symbol. Remember, we say the Lion of Judah, Lion of Judah. Well, the lion is the symbol for the tribe Judah, and each tribe has a symbol. And I don't think that I have that readily, but I'm going to find it and send it to you. But it says everybody is around. Now those who camp on the east side toward the sunrise shall be the standard of the camp of Judah by their armies. So you can see here that Judah is first. Judah is first. Now, remember who comes out of Judah. Who comes out of Judah? We believe that Jesus comes out of Judah, and Judah is first. So the camp of Judah will lead when they get ready to start marching. Judah is going to lead. Judah is going to lead. And so we have Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. And you can see the numbers that Judah had. I'm sorry. Judah had 74,600. Now, these are just men, able-bodied men from 20 and up. Issachar had 54,400, and Zebulun had 57,400. So again, Judah is going to lead. It says now, and it kind of like goes through those who camp next to him would be Issachar and the leaders of the sons of, and so forth, and Zebulun. And then you see on the south side, you got the camp of Reuben, which includes Reuben, Simeon, and Gad. Okay. And then we have on the west, Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin, and on the north, Dan, Asher, and Naphtali. Now again, the tribe of Levi is not among the camps. They are a camp within itself, so to speak, but then they are divided into the Gershonites, the Merarites, and the Kohathites. And Aaron and Moses were, these are the priests. But who is in the center? God is in the center. God is in the center. Okay, and all of this is going to make sense. And so all through the rest of chapter 2 deals with the way they are set up and the way they are ordered. All right. the way they are ordered. And so when we get to chapter 3, we will look at the it deals with the tribe of Levi and what Levi's job was to do. And if we look at 3, now these are the records of the generations of Aaron and Moses at the time when the Lord spoke with Moses on Mount Sinai. Then these are the names of the sons of Aaron: Nadab, the firstborn, and Abihu. Remember last week we talked about, week before, can't remember, that his firstborns were taken out because they offered up an unconsecrated offering to God. So when we get to 5, then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, bring the tribe of Levi near and set them before Aaron the priest, that they may serve him. So the Levites will serve Aaron. They shall perform the duties of him in the whole congregation before the tent of meeting to do the service of the tabernacle. They are to keep all the furnishings of the tent of meeting, along with the duties of the sons of Israel to do the service of the tabernacle. And it goes a little further on. And even these particular, each one of them, these groups, even within the tribe of Levi, had a particular job. So what this shows is that every person, every camp, every tribe had a function, and God believes in order. God believes in order. This was a strategic move. Okay, this was a strategic move, and everybody was in its place, should be in its proper place. So when they get ready to march out, again, the order of the march, we have the tabernacle in the center. And again, they're going to start with Judah camp, Reuben's camp, Ephraim's camp, and Dan's camp. So if we go back to 2 and 17, it just kind of like says, then the tent of the meeting shall set out with the camp of the Levites in the midst, just as they camp, so they shall set out, every man in his place by their standards. This is a good point to say that God is to be at the center of our lives. No matter what's around us, God is to be at the center. And also it suggests to me is that we all have a place. We all have a proper place to be in. And when we get out of our place, or the role that God has given us, it disrupts the process. It disrupts the flow of things. It disrupts. It causes problems. And when one person is out of order, then it causes the whole thing to shift. So God is showing them that he wants order. He wants it to be strategic, but he is to be in the center. So the geographic locations of these events, if you remember, we have come a long ways. We started way over here in Egypt, and we come through Marah. Remember the bitter water where they complained at, and then the water was bitter. Then they had no water. Then they had no food, and all the complaining. And so we are still right here at the Mount Sinai. This is where all the laws were given. This is where the 10 Commandments were given. This is where the covenant was given, right here at Mount Sinai or Mount Horeb. And so they will stay here from Numbers 1 through 10. And as we move up and they start moving out, they will make some stops along the way, and we're going to talk about them. But at the end of the day, when we get to the end of Numbers, we are right ready to cross the Jordan. When we get to Numbers, we should be ready to cross the Jordan. But this is where they got hung up at. So they were not far. They were not far from the promised land, but they got hung up. Just think about it in your own lives, where perhaps you can see it. As they say, you can almost taste it, touch it, but you can't get over. There's some obstacle, whether it's self-imposed, other imposed, somebody else put the roadblocks there, but you can't get there. So you just end up being in the wilderness, being in the wilderness. So what can we learn from Numbers, even just the first 4 chapters, is that we want to be among those numbered who are able to go forth to war. Now, of course, we are not talking about a physical war. For us, we're talking about a spiritual war, some type of thing that we have to come up with, that comes up against us. We want to be the ones to say, yes, I am able. I am spiritually able to tackle this. I am strong enough to deal with it. I am strong enough to withstand the war. We want to be the one among those who are numbered, because there were some who were 20 and above who were not counted, because there was a stipulation that you need to be able to go forth to war. Another thing is that we can learn as we go through this here book of Numbers, is that we should take the commandments of the Lord seriously. And that is one thing that is going to get in the children of Israel in trouble, is because they did not take the commandments seriously. Do according to all that Jehovah has commanded. And God wants order by his own standard, for our lives as we travel through life. Now, the standard, of course, as we read in the was kind of like their flag, or their sort of like, you know, you're in a parade or whatever, and you have this poster or you have this banner that marches in front of the group that's coming to say, this is Peabody High School, this is Grambling, this is Southern's Band. Well, we have a standard that God has given us to say, this is one of mine. But we need to be able to hold that standard up. Proceed forward with God, with the tent of meeting at the center of our lives. That, yes, we're going forward. Yes, we should be making progress, but God should be in the middle. Now, of course, we don't have a tent of meeting. God is in our hearts, should be at the center. And we're going to also see that there were specific instructions about how to take the tent of the meeting down, how to put it up, who was in charge of that. Everybody had a function. We don't have to take down and put up the tent of the meeting every time we want to move forward, because God is in us. God lives within us. Another lesson is to fulfill the service of every faithful follower of God. That every person, every follower of God has a particular service or function, and that we should want to fulfill the function or the service that God has given us. Now, the connection between chapters 1 and 4 and 5 and 9 is that there is a physical ordering and a spiritual ordering. The physical ordering was God, of course, putting the people the way they needed to be placed to march before the Canaan, to get to Canaan. But in our life is the spiritual ordering of God's people before the march to Canaan. So they had to be intact physical, and they have to be intact spiritually. And most so for us, we have to be, if we're going to take the land, if we're going to make progress, then we have to be together spiritually. God is a God of order. And we found that out in the book of Leviticus, because there were specific instructions for everything. It's about order. A lot of times we just kind of like do things and we don't pay deep attention to details. We just kind of like do it because we've been doing some things for so long the same way, but we don't pay attention to if this is the right order or the right, I would say the right way according to what God has given us. So that is an overview of the book of Numbers. I told you it will be a short one tonight, but if we have some questions, we can